Imagine this. You're sitting in your living room, feeling a bit under the weather, and you call the one person you trust most with your health, your family doctor. He arrives promptly, listens to your concerns with a reassuring smile, rolls up your sleeve for what seems like a routine check, and within moments, everything fades to black. Not from illness, but from a deliberate act hidden behind a white coat. This isn't a nightmare from a thriller novel. It's the chilling reality of one man's betrayal of the Hippocratic Oath, a story that unfolded quietly in the quiet streets of a small English town for over 2 decades. Welcome to the case of Harold Shipman, the doctor who turned healing into horror. It all began in the unassuming town of Hyde, Greater Manchester, in the late 1970s, a place of terraced houses, corner shops, and close-knit communities where everyone knew their neighbors and, more importantly, their GP. Harold Frederick Shipman, born on January 14, 1946, in Nottingham to a working-class family, seemed like the picture of suburban success. The second of three boys, he grew up in a modest home, his father a lorry driver, his mother a devoted homemaker who instilled Methodist values of hard work and quiet respectability. Young Harold was a bright student at High Pavement Grammar School, described by classmates as reserved, almost aloof, but diligent. Tragedy struck early when, at just 17, he watched his mother, Vera, succumb to lung cancer in 1963. He was by her bedside as a home nurse administered morphine to ease her final breaths. A moment that, years later, investigators would point to as possibly planting the seeds of a dark fascination with controlling the end of life. Shipman pursued medicine with determination, enrolling at Leeds University Medical School in 1965. There, in his first year, he met and quickly married Primrose Oxtoby after she became pregnant. They would go on to have 4 children, 2 sons and 2 daughters, who grew up in the stable, if unremarkable, family home. He graduated in 1970 and started his career as a junior doctor at Pontefract General Infirmary, then moved into general practice. By 1974, at age 28, he joined the Abraham Ormerod Medical Center in Todmorden, a picturesque town straddling the Lancashire-Yorkshire border. But shadows emerged early. In 1975, colleagues noticed irregularities. Shipman was prescribing unusually large quantities of pethidine, a powerful painkiller. It turned out he was forging prescriptions for his own use, feeding a growing dependency. Confronted, he confessed, underwent psychiatric treatment at the retreat in York from October to December that year, and in 1976, faced charges at Halifax Magistrates Court for forgery and unlawful possession. He was fined £600, about $800 in today's terms, and ordered to repay the health service, but received no jail time, only a warning letter from the medical council. Strikingly, this brush with the law barely dented his career. He simply relocated, taking a role as a clinical medical officer in southwest Durham before landing what would become his deadly domain. In 1977, Shipman joined the Donnybrook House Group practice in Hyde, a bustling market town of around 35,000 souls, where the air carried the scent of rain-soaked cobblestones and fresh-baked pies from local bakeries. Hyde was the kind of place where doctors made house calls without question, building bonds that lasted generations. Shipman fit right in, charming, efficient, always available. He had a dry wit, enjoyed a pint at the local pub, and even appeared in a 1983 Granada television documentary on mental health, sharing insights from his own recovery. By 1992, he'd gone solo, opening his own surgery at 21, Market Street, a modest brick building squeezed between a newsagent and a florist. Patients adored him. He remembered birthdays, offered tea during consultations, and never rushed a visit. Primrose managed the home front, their children excelling in school, the family attending church sporadically. To all outward appearances, Harold Shipman was the ideal GP, a pillar of the community. But beneath that facade, something sinister was brewing. From his time in Todmorden onward, and accelerating in Hyde, Shipman began selecting patients, mostly elderly women, often widows living alone, trusting and isolated, who would never leave his care alive. These women weren't chosen at random. They were vulnerable yet vibrant souls, the backbone of Hyde's community. Take, for instance, the patterns that would later emerge. Patients like Lily Acton, a retired seamstress in her 70s who baked scones for church fetes, or Sarah Atkinson, a grandmother known for her knitting circles. Many were in remarkably good health for their age, with no terminal illnesses, just the minor aches of getting on in years. Shipman targeted those who lived independently, who relied on him for everything from flu shots to friendly chats. He built their trust meticulously, visiting unannounced with excuses like routine checks or blood pressure monitoring. His victims spanned all walks: former mayoresses, shopkeepers, mothers, artists, but shared a common thread. They were women over 65, comprising about 80% of those he harmed, though he didn't spare men or younger patients entirely. Norman Adshed, a quiet pensioner in his 80s, or youngish Bianca Pomfret, just 49 and battling mild anxiety, fell into his web too. By the time the full scope unfolded, the official tally stood at 215 confirmed lives cut short by his hand, with suspicions around 45 more, potentially 250 in total, stretching back to 1975. These weren't acts of mercy. Autopsies would reveal no underlying conditions justifying their sudden passings. Instead, Shipman's medical notes, once scrutinized, showed fabricated histories of chronic pain, heart issues, or addictions to justify prescriptions he never intended them to fill. The way Shipman carried out these acts was as methodical as it was monstrous, exploiting the intimacy of home visits in an era before digital records or mandatory second opinions. Picture a typical afternoon in Hyde. It's a drizzly Tuesday in 1997, and 77-year-old Lizzie Adams, a sprightly widow with a penchant for gardening, hears the familiar knock at her door. Shipman arrives in his tweed jacket, stethoscope around his neck, carrying his black medical bag. "Just popping by to check on that cough, Mrs. Adams," he says with his trademark warmth, settling her into her armchair by the window overlooking her rose bushes. She chats about her grandchildren's latest antics as he prepares a syringe, claiming it's a vitamin boost or pain reliever for her mild bronchitis. In reality, it's a massive dose of diamorphine, medical-grade heroin, far beyond therapeutic levels, sourced from his own supplies or pilfered stock. The injection goes into her arm or thigh. Within minutes, her breathing slows, her eyelids droop, and she slumps forward, gone. Shipman doesn't panic. He straightens her clothes, props her up to look natural, and dials a non-existent ambulance while muttering about a sudden turn. Then, he forges the death certificate on the spot. Pneumonia, natural causes. No post-mortem needed. He's the authority. He calls the family with condolences, perhaps even attends the funeral, all while cremation forms vanish the evidence in a puff of smoke. This scene replayed with eerie precision across Hyde. On May 29, 1997, 63-year-old Ivy Lomas arrived at his surgery for a checkup, complaining of leg pain. Shipman locked the door, administered the fatal dose right there in the exam room, then discovered her unresponsive and performed a sham resuscitation in front of waiting patients. Heart failure, he announced solemnly, his notes retroactively listing chronic conditions she'd never had. Or consider 81-year-old Marie West on March 6, 1995. A former shop owner in robust health, she welcomed him for a blood pressure reading. He injected her while a friend waited in the next room, unaware that the stroke, he later claimed, was a lethal overdose. Toxicology later confirmed diamorphine in her system, levels that would fell an elephant. Shipman killed at least one every few months, sometimes clustering them. 3 in 1998 alone after initial suspicions arose. He prescribed abnormally high amounts of the drug to himself under false pretenses, stockpiling it for these private executions. Bodies were often found fully clothed, seated comfortably, as if they'd simply nodded off. Families, grateful for his kindness in certifying deaths without fuss, footed cremation costs that erased forensic traces forever. In total, over 80% of his victims were cremated, a statistic that would haunt investigators. Whispers of unease had circulated for years, but it took a perfect storm to crack the case open. As early as 1985, police briefly probed the death of one patient, but dropped it for lack of evidence. By the mid-1990s, colleagues noticed the anomaly. Shipman's patient mortality rate was 50 times the national average, with 171 deaths in his practice from 1986 to 1998, mostly women over 65. Dr. Linda Reynolds, a fellow GP in Hyde, grew troubled by the parade of funerals, dozens in a town that size seemed impossible. In March 1998, she formally raised alarms with the coroner, John Pollard, sharing cremation forms that raised red flags. Vague causes like old age or heart failure, all signed by Shipman. The coroner passed it to Greater Manchester Police, who launched Operation Rose. But the initial team, led by inexperienced detectives, fumbled. They interviewed Shipman, who charmed them with alibis and spotless records, and closed the file in April after just 7 weeks, citing no evidence of foul play. Shipman, emboldened, pressed on, claiming 3 more lives before summer. The breakthrough came not from statistics, but from a forged signature on a will. Enter Kathleen Grundy, 81, Hyde's former mayoress, a fitness enthusiast, widow of a solicitor, and mother to Angela Woodruff, a sharp-eyed lawyer. On June 24, 1998, Shipman visited her home under the guise of drawing blood for a checkup. He injected the diamorphine, left her slumped on her sofa in a neat blouse and slacks, and certified her death as a cerebral aneurysm due to chronic hypertension, a condition she never had. The true horror emerged in the courtroom, a revelation that stunned the nation and redefined medical trust. Shipman's trial at Preston Crown Court began October 5, 1999, before Mr. Justice Forbes and a jury of 7 women and 5 men. Prosecutors, led by Michael Worsley, painted a portrait of a control-obsessed killer who played God, presenting autopsies, timelines, and witness testimonies from shaken families. Shipman, defending himself after sacking his lawyers, ranted incoherently about conspiracies, refusing to enter pleas or testify. After 57 days, the longest murder trial in English history, the jury deliberated 6 days and, on January 31, 2000, returned unanimous guilty verdicts on 15 counts of murder and 1 forgery. Sentenced to life with a whole life tariff, meaning no parole, plus 4 years concurrent for the will, Justice Forbes called him a cunning and sophisticated predator who'd exploited his position. Struck off the medical register days later, Shipman was unrepentant, telling prison staff, "I've done my bit." Primrose stood by him, selling stories to fund appeals that went nowhere. Justice came, but closure proved elusive as the inquiry peeled back layers of systemic failure. In February 2000, Health Secretary Alan Milburn launched a public probe under the Tribunals of Inquiry Act, chaired by High Court Judge Dame Janet Smith. Phase 1 hearings, starting June 2001 in Manchester's Great Hall, dissected each death. Families wept as photos of smiling victims flashed on screens. The July 2002 first report dropped like a bomb. Shipman had likely killed 215 patients from 1975 to 1998, starting possibly within a year of qualifying as a doctor at age 25. Patterns scream neglect. Why hadn't the General Medical Council acted on his 1975 drug conviction? Why did coroners rubber stamp his certificates? Later phases blamed inadequate policing and a defective regulatory system, recommending spot checks on GPs and mandatory postmortems for unexplained deaths. The final sixth report in January 2005 tallied potentially 250 victims, urging a profound cultural shift in oversight. Shipman, transferred to Wakefield Prison, isolated himself, befriending another convicted killer but shunning remorse programs. On January 13, 2004, just before his 58th birthday, he was found in his cell, having ended his life by hanging from the window bars with bedsheets. No note, no warning. An inquest ruled it self-inflicted, denying families the confrontation they craved. Primrose collected his body in secret. The nation breathed uneasy relief, but scars lingered. Hyde's trust in doctors shattered. Reforms like the 2005 Mental Capacity Act born from the ashes. The Shipman saga forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about authority and vulnerability. What red flags did we miss in our own lives? How do we protect the elderly without paranoia? And could better systems have saved those 250 souls? If this story left you questioning the shadows behind the stethoscope, drop your thoughts below. 1. Do you think Shipman's early drug issues were a warning ignored? 2. What one reform from the inquiry do you believe is most crucial today? 3. What's the most shocking doctor-patient betrayal case you've heard of? Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Crime Justice for weekly deep dives into real-life mysteries that grip the nation. Hit that bell so you never miss an update. Your support keeps justice in the spotlight. Stay curious, stay safe,